Well, there are bad racing games, and then there are these kinds of racing games. The ones you don't hear about, or the ones that never had a chance of competing with some of the bigger names. The ones that even quietly appeared on shop shelves, sat there for a few months, and then vanished into obscurity. And every now and then you come across one and start to wonder, how and why did this actually get released? Because the PS2 era was packed with racing games. You had the heavy hitters, the arcade classics, the weirder experimental stuff. There really was something for everyone. Even budget titles could surprise you. Sometimes they lacked polish, yeah, but they'd make up for it with charm or speed or just some kind of identity. But then you get games that feel like they skipped that step entirely. Welcome to the Worst Racing Games, the internet series where you guys suggest different racing games that you think are terrible, then I play them, review them, and rank them. Last week we had the surprisingly entertaining Crash and Burn, and the wheel this week has blessed us with GT Racers. A game that looks like a racing game, sounds like a racing game, but once you actually sit down and play said racing game, you realise very quickly that something is just off. Released in 2004, developed by Aqua Pacific, who, and I say this with absolutely no disrespect, but also complete honesty, are best known for making a couple of licensed Top Trumps games on the PS2, which already kind of tells you everything you need to know, and published by Oxygen Interactive, which is a company that was very much in the business of pumping out low-budget titles during the PS2 era. And just to make things even weirder, this game also got a Game Boy Advance release in 2006. 2 years later, genuinely who was asking for more of this game? Now if this series has taught me one thing, it's to always try and go into these budget racers with an open mind. The PS2 era was full of hidden gems after all, and most of them in the lower price brackets. Not everything had to be Gran Turismo to be enjoyable. Sometimes you get something scrappy but fun, but GT Racers is not one of those games. This is the kind of thing that feels like it exists purely to fill shelf space. The kind of thing you'd find in a bargain bin for maybe £4.99, if they were overcharging, and even then you'd hesitate slightly before you pick it up. So first things first, let's start with the menus, because surprisingly this is one of the more competent parts of the game. They're not good, let's be very clear about that, but at least they're serviceable. Everything is fairly clean, it's relatively easy to navigate, and weirdly it's kinda sleek in a very early 2000s budget software kind of way. It's hard to explain, but there's almost this illusion of quality here. Like if you just looked at screenshots of the menus, you might think, this might be a halfway decent racing game. But of course that illusion disappears very quickly the moment you actually start playing. Still, credit where it's due, we've seen far worse menu systems in PS2 budget titles, even in this series. At the very least, GT Racers doesn't actively frustrate you before you even get into a race, and that's about as much praise as I can give this game as a whole, so let's get on to the bad. So in terms of content, things are of course incredibly bare bones. You've got two modes, and that is Quick Race and Championship. That's it, guys, that's literally it. No time trials, no multiplayer modes, no unlock systems, no meaningful progression, just those two options. And even the Championship mode isn't really much of a championship. It's essentially one long sequence of races across all available tracks. There are 5 tracks in total, yes, 5, and each one has a nighttime variant. Now you might think that doubles the content, right? Well, day and night versions? Well, not really, because the night versions are barely darker anyway. It's like someone just nudged the brightness slider down by about 5% and went, fuck it, that'll do. There's no real atmosphere, no meaningful difference in visibility, no added challenge, they just exist to pad out the track list and drag the game out a little bit longer. So realistically, you're dealing with 5 tracks, and you'll be seeing them over and over and over again. Lucky you. Now we get to the most important part of any racing game, the actual gameplay, and this is where GT Racers completely falls apart. The handling is honestly kind of fascinating in how bad and rough it really is. It somehow manages to feel both overly sensitive and completely unresponsive at the exact same time. You'll turn slightly and the car will jerk violently like you've yanked the wheel across the entire goddamn dashboard, but then other times you'll try to correct your line and it just doesn't really respond at all. There's just no consistency, no predictability. It just feels like the game is making decisions on a whim, independently of your actual inputs, and because of that, you never really feel in control of the car. You're not driving, you're just kind of reacting to whatever the game decides it wants to do next. Which is just no way to play at all. I mean, maybe it's novel for like 5 minutes, but beyond that, what's the point? Now, before we go any further, if you're a fan of racing games, or in this case perhaps more terrible racing games, then please consider hitting that subscribe button and tapping the bell for notifications to stay up to date with my future uploads. And perhaps if you'd like to get some extra goodies, consider checking out my Patreon, where you'll get access to videos early, your name in the credits of uploads, and some other cool behind the scenes stuff. Anyway, that's in the description below. Thanks for listening to my sale pitch, let's get back to GT Racers. So whilst GT Racers has some very strange design decisions, there is one that's definitely the contender for the worst, or weirdest. You are permanently stuck in bumper cam. No third person view, no chase cam, nothing. The only time the game actually switches perspective is when you look behind you, or when you crash and it just randomly goes into third person. And that's it. I feel like this raises so many questions, like why? Why would you lock the player into a bumper cam in a game where the handling is already terrible, the track design isn't great, and spatial awareness is actually important? It makes the game harder to play, and not in a challenging or rewarding way, but in a frustrating, disorienting way. And then, this is the part that really gets me, the game has 3 different buttons to look behind you, triangle and the 2 triggers. 3. Why do you need 3 separate buttons for the same function, when you don't even have 1 button to change the perspective? It's such a bizarre allocation of controls that it almost feels like a mistake, like something went wrong in the development process and they just never bothered to fix it. Or maybe, and this is a genuine theory, they just didn't include a third person camera because the car models look so bad that they didn't want you to see them. Which honestly wouldn't surprise me. Maybe that's why the AI is so bad and you overtake them so quickly, so you don't actually have to look at them. Now, speaking of car models, this is not a good looking game. Now, to be fair, I've definitely seen worse on the PS2, especially in the budget category, but that's not really a compliment. That's just saying it's not at the absolute bottom of the barrel. The cars themselves are unlicensed, and whilst there's nothing wrong with that, they are, frankly, very ugly. They lack detail, they lack personality, and since you're stuck in bumper cam, you barely even see them anyway, which makes their existence feel almost completely and utterly pointless. The environments are equally bland, there's no real identity to any of the tracks even though they are set in real-world locations like London and Tokyo. They all kind of blend together into this generic low-detail landscape that occasionally has a landmark like the London Eye. And then there's the pop-in. On certain tracks, especially the London track, it's really noticeable. Objects just appear out of nowhere as you're driving, which is incredibly distracting and further adds to the overall lack of polish. There's just zero visual cohesion, there's no sense of place and no atmosphere. It feels like a collection of unfinished assets stitched together into something that vaguely resembles a racing game. And whilst we're at it, the audio isn't exactly much better. As far as I can tell, there are basically 2 music tracks in the entire game, and that's one for the menus and one for the races. And neither of them are particularly memorable or any good. They're just kind of there, looping endlessly and doing the bare minimum to fill the silence. Honestly, you're probably better off just turning the music off and putting your own playlist on. The engine sounds are fine, I guess, completely generic, but at least functional. The problem is that none of the cars have distinct audio profiles, so every vehicle sounds exactly the same. which again reinforces this feeling that nothing in the game really matters. Your car choice doesn't matter, the tracks don't matter, the experience is just this flat, incredibly repetitive loop. So the game features 9 cars in total, and I genuinely cannot stress enough how little that bit of information matters. They all feel the exact same to drive. There is no meaningful difference in handling, speed, or performance that you can actually feel during the gameplay, and since you can't even see the car that you're driving most of the time, it becomes even more irrelevant. It's like the game is presenting you with choices that don't actually exist. Pick your car. Like, okay, but why? What difference does it actually make? And the answer to that, viewers, is none. So you put all that together, and what you end up with is a game that feels incredibly hollow. There is no depth, no variety, and no sense of progression or reward. It's just drive poorly handled cars, on bland tracks, with minimal content, and questionable design decisions, over and over again. And because of that, it becomes boring very quickly. And not even in an entertainingly bad way, it's just very, very dull. Now, unsurprisingly, GT Racers doesn't even have a Metacritic score, which says a lot in itself. There is, however, a single user review floating around that gives it a 1 out of 10. And honestly, it pretty much sums everything up perfectly, and I will read it to you now. The cars are all unlicensed and ugly, the tracks are bland, plus there are only 5 of them. And the physics are incredibly wonky. For some reason, this game features 3 different buttons for reverse view, but none for changing the camera. But really, the only 2 buttons you need will be on the console for turning it off and ejecting the disc. Only really has use for game collectors. So yeah, I don't think I could put it any better than that. Okay, so now the time has come to rank GT Racers on our worst racing games tier list. Now obviously I don't think this is the absolute bottom of the barrel of this series, but it's definitely up there with some of the worst that we've played. So really there's no other place for this game than to go into pure evil. It really is just a bad game, there's not really any redeeming features here, it's not fun, there's no entertainment value from how bad it is, even the crashes are just boring, there's just nothing going on here. GT Racers is one of those games that's hard to recommend to pretty much anyone, even if you're a fan of retro racing games, even if you enjoy budget titles, or if you're even looking for something obscure, because there's nothing here to latch onto. There's no hidden charm, no unique hook, not even a so bad it's good factor, it's just bad. The kind of game that feels unfinished, poorly thought out, and completely lacking an identity. The only real reason to play it is out of curiosity, or if you're a collector trying to experience every PS2 racing game ever made. And even then, you might get about 10 minutes in before deciding you've seen everything it has to offer. And so that takes us to the end of our look at GT Racers, and with it, this week's episode of the worst racing games. So let me know in the comments down below, have you played this game? Are you gonna play this game? Would you have ranked it any differently? And as always, if you have a suggestion for the wheel, pop that down there as well. If you enjoyed this video, please don't forget to leave a like, and if you haven't done so already, consider subscribing. A massive shout out to my Patreon subscribers for the continued support, and all I really have left to say is thank you and goodbye.